What is going on, Kings fans? I'm Rudy Hodgson. He is Jordan Bacani, and this is episode 2 of Forum Blues, powered by the Alethio Network. Wherever, however you're listening to us, thank you for sitting down and talking a little bit of Kings hockey with us. Jordan, how you doing, player?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Can't complain. A little rainy day here in the Windy City, but a little rain never hurt anybody. What's the weather looking like in California these days?
I just woke up, so haven't been outside yet. Haven't really looked out the window, but we'll see after the show, I guess.
Yeah, for those at home, you just woke up. It is 4:30 Pacific time.
It's 4:13. Give me a break.
Yeah, for some context, so people don't think you're just sleeping until 4. You should probably tell them what you do for a living.
Yeah, I'm a night shift nurse, so I got off at 7:30 in the mornings. Yeah, my hour is a little opposite of the rest of everybody else, but I'm not sure I'm not just a low life. I don't just wake up at 3 p.m. on a daily basis.
Jordan is on the grind. Jordan's out here saving lives. I'm out here just talking about LA Kings hockey, which is here exactly what we're going to do. So let's get right into the thick of things. Training camp begins. Things are off and running. The LA Kings have gotten things going at Toyota Performance Sports Center. I
Sports
believe
Performance
they
Center.
there.
Sports TSBC. Yeah.
I still refer to it as TSC. That's what I remember it being as when I lived there. Either way, training camp starts. Already some big news out of LA Kings land. We'll get into the big one. This is the appetizer for that main course. The physicality of a training camp for the LA Kings has been at an all-time high, according to Zach Dooley, the LA Kings insider. Jeff Ballot, Samuel Helena went hard into Darcy Kemper in that first half of their scrimmage. Offense taken. Malott got into a fight. Jordan, I can't recall the last time I heard of a training camp fight in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I don't really recall either. We got a fight. You had the day before this. There was engagement and some words between two guys that'll definitely have a starting roster spot in Tanner Jeannot and Warren Fogle. So you got guys that you want to say guys are fighting for their spot. Guys are fighting to be seen, and so maybe it's just like a culture shift in LA. What do you think we're looking at here?
Well, a lot of people think that it's a culture shift for the worse. If guys are fighting in training camp, it means they don't like each other. The chemistry is low. I actually disagree. I think this is an example of, a couple former players ourselves. You have to make a name for yourself early in training camp. These are guys that there are no guaranteed roster spots. That might not actually be true, but that is the outlook that these guys have to have when they're fighting for their job. So I don't think it's a culture problem, nor is it really much of a culture shift. I think it's just guys being guys. They're doing the unwritten rules of hockey. You go hard into your goaltender, you got to defend your goaltender, and if you take exception to that, you got to defend yourself. So that is, at its root, is what hockey really is. It's just guys being dudes, and I think that's a clear example of it.
Yeah, I mean, you watch the interviews post-training camp days. Jim Hiller, they had media that asked him about the physicality. Alex Turcotte stated that it was one of the most intense camp he's been a part of so far. So I don't see a problem with it. I don't. Versus, I think some people out there think there's internal problems. I don't think that there is. I think there's guys coming in from different teams, different organizations, and everyone's just excited to play hockey. And when you're playing hockey the right way, hard, versus like today's game, there's a lot more skill, a lot more speed. But when you're playing hard, aggressive, physical hockey, there's going to be some disagreements. There's going to be some fights, and I see no problem with that.
I completely agree. But unfortunately, there is the other side of the physicality. People are receiving that physicality, and that's exactly what happened to Arthur Kaliev. At the time you're listening to this, Zach Dooley just confirmed what we believed, and that is that Arthur Kaliev will be out indefinitely with a fractured clavicle after that collision with Kyle Burroughs in the second day of training camp. And Jordan, when we finished off our first episode, we were talking about what is he going to re-sign for? Is he going to re-sign? Is he going to get dealt? Well, we got confirmation on all those things. He did get signed, re-upped with LA for a season, $825K, and then on the second day of training camp, something like this happens. You absolutely hate to see it. This is a guy that needed that training camp probably more than anybody else in that lineup.
Yeah, it's absolutely awful. I mean, we didn't really predict him to be in the starting roster in the starting lineup, but it was looking like we were going to be wrong. He was skating on that fourth line with Keel Thomas and Trevor Lewis, and to see him go down like that after he just the day before after signing on the interview, he said he felt like he had a fresh start. And
Mm-hmm.
for a guy like Kaliev who didn't get much opportunity last year and kind of got kind of blackballed out of the lineup, you just hate to see something like that happen to a kid.
Dennis Bernstein speculated, reported, I don't really know the right word for it, that he could miss probably up to 4 months, 5 months, a few months is the terminology that I'm going with. You absolutely hate to see what happened to Kaliev, but hopefully, maybe after a stint in Ontario, he gets a little bit of that confidence back. He does crack the lineup. I think one of the good things about this LA Kings lineup is there is depth. There are guys that they can look to, but this does kind of confirm in some way that Trevor Lewis will probably see the opening night lineup when the Kings open up their season against Buffalo on the 10th of October. But, there's not really a whole lot to report other than the obvious. Kaliev out. Unfortunate news. But the Kings do have to continue with training camp as hard as it may be in what has obviously already been a very physical training camp. So with all that being said, here's some positive-ish news in LA Kings land. Anze Kopitar doubles down, tells the media after the first or second day of training camp, we aren't playing the 1-3-1 anymore. So when you look systematically how the Kings could line up, things that they could shift, what is it in this lineup that you think is going to change for the better, the more positive? And, we'll talk a little bit about that defensive culture that they had. How much is that going to change?
I mean, you look at the 1-3-1 as a system, and as hockey players, we call it the trap, right?
Yeah.
You hate playing against a team that's playing the trap, and we know because we used to be that team when we've had to play against better teams that were more skilled and faster. Well, the 1-3-1 is a way of slowing the game down, but the negative of that is if you have some of those faster, skilled guys on your team, it limits the ice space. It limits the creativity that can happen both defensively and offensively. So I could talk about this more of a culture shift in the physicality. You got younger guys, you got faster guys, you got a little bit more skill, and Kevin Fiala has been here for a few years, but there's that skill that specifically that the 1-3-1 limits. So you guys got older guys on the team like Kopitar, Drew Doughty, who may benefit from a 1-3-1 because they don't have the legs under them that these 20-year-olds do. But we'll see how they adjust to not playing the 1-3-1, to the ice being more open. And I think hopefully the speed of our young guys will make up for the lack of speed that the veterans have. What's your take on the 1-3-1 not being used this year?
I agree that 1-3-1 really limits the creativity of the lineup. And when you bring in guys like Kevin Fiala and you want a rising star like Quentin Byfield to take the next step, you have to give them the freedom to make plays. And we already kind of have seen the pros and cons with Fiala as far as giving him that space, because sometimes he misses defensive assignments on the way back. And the 1-3-1 is a system where if everyone isn't locked into that style of play, then you're going to be exposed because you have a guy up front and a guy behind. That creates so much space when you burst through the seams that it's an odd man rush, right? So I think the best way to combat the 1-3-1 is obviously with speed, individual skill, and talent. That's kind of what McDavid brought to the table. And then when you bring in a guy like Draisaitl on the off wing, they're going to make you pay. But we don't have to worry about that anymore because that's not what they're going to play. So for me, and I'm kind of throwing it back to you, seasons past, the Kings have been so defensively tough. They make you pay when you make mistakes in the neutral zone off that counter, and then they clog the neutral zone. Shifting the 1-3-1 and potentially shifting that defensive culture that you've established in years past, you have to wonder about guys like Darcy Kemper, who are probably going to be seeing more shots because of it. You have to wonder about these young defensive stars that we have in Spence and Clark. how much creativity, how much space are you going to give them to join the rush? There's a lot of questions as far as how Jim Hiller is going to incorporate this new system that he's been preaching in a way that's going to satisfy older players that have their way kind of established, and then these young stars that need that creative outlet. I'm curious for you, what would you like to see them play, and what do you think of those, young defensemen coming up and maybe being a part of that?
I think the defense culture as a whole, I don't think it has to change or go away. I think it just has to adjust. So if you're not playing the 1-3-1, I think what's going to make up for that, and like you said, save our defensemen and save our goaltending, or just help them out in this case, would be the strong play of the centerman. So you look at Andre Kopitar, Philippe Deneau, and Quinton Byfield. You Byfield are learning off Kopi and Deneau, but Kopi and Deneau defensively strong, solid, and that's not going to change. And I think that will kind of make up for, you know, what not playing the 1-3-1 lacks. You're going to have Byfield learning from that. And I think as long as our centermen play a strong two-way game, like the way that has been ingrained in the Kings for so long, I don't think, you know, it'll be as much of a problem as we're foreseeing for our defensemen and our goalies.
So how much defense are you willing to sacrifice for offense? Like what do you think the balance is going to be on night one of the regular season? Do you see it? Because here's the thing: when you do commit to more offense, you are giving up the defense. It's just a way of life. That's just the way things go. If you're not protecting the house, that means you're exposing the house. So I throw it back to you. How much are you willing to give, and how long before they kind of revert a little bit to that defensive game if things don't really work? It is a matter of how much of this is going to work. What's that leash look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you give it like, I don't know, I'd say my number would be like 4 to 7 games. I think it's going to be very awkward in the beginning stages because you have preseason, but you aren't playing all your starters in the preseason games. It's going to take a little bit for it to click. It's going to take, some struggles for it to click. And like you asked, what am I willing to give up? What's the balance? I think I think that is yet to be seen. I think there is a whole lot of how do you say it? Just we got to see what the balance is, and we have a lack of offense for I don't know how many years we haven't had. When was I don't remember our last 100-point score. Might have been a little more recent, but we don't really have any of that 100-point consistent superstar talent. So we have to make up for that with secondary scoring. And the Kings have always been a secondary scoring team. And we want to, have that carry us a little further than it has in past years.
As we head into the final couple days here of training camp, the Kings did announce their player groups for preseason games that are coming up. And Group A is extremely, in our eyes, close to what opening day is going to look like, give or take a couple of changes. Jordan, you were bang on in Kemper and Riddick. I had Kemper and Copley. But this is kind of where it gets a little interesting as far as the defensemen. 8 defensemen. England's a part of that list. Burrows is a part of that list. Everyone else, the usual suspects who we predicted would be there. And then the offense, just kind of top to bottom, copy paste what we talked about last week. As you head into preseason, this is the group that is going to establish that style of play. I'm not saying that it's exactly what we're going to see night one, but it's going to set the table. So we'll kind of get little its and bits of what Jim Hiller is cooking up in LA when we see Group A hit the ice. We don't know when this particular group is going to play, but we do know that that list is coming, and as the press release states, subject to change. So we'll see what preseason looks like for the LA Kings. But in the meantime, some more news. LA Kings jerseys now on sale Fanatics finally has them in stock. A lot of people question the quality of those jerseys, what they were going to look like, what the price was going to be like. We're here to report the Authentic Pro jerseys, $424. The premiums, $229 with the name, and then $179 blank. Hit me, Jordan. What were you going to say?
That Authentic Pro is that's a blank, by the way, that price.
How much do you think it'll be with a name?
It's plus 100, I think.
Good God. Could you imagine? I mean, I know you and I will probably end up dropping that for the Authentic Pro, but
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about these jerseys because I think this is very interesting and I do have a couple of opinions on it, but I'm going to let you go first. This is the first time in quite a while that Kings fans are going to have access to made in Canada jerseys that are not through the game worn process that they kind of have internally. So for Kings fans, how cool is it to have that access to buy jerseys that Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe would be wearing? They're not game issued, but they are the style that they're going to be wearing.
Yeah, no, I think for a jersey collector myself, I'm pumped. I think there's a common misconception out there that this $424 price point is for, what Adidas was making at that, what was it, $280 price point. But that's not the case. The 424 price is something that we haven't been offered, like you said, in a while. And those made in Indonesia, authentic, we call them authentic jerseys, because I know a lot of hardcore jersey collectors wouldn't call them that. But those Indonesian made jerseys we're at the $229 price point now. And when we talk about quality, I think they're exact same factory that Adidas was using for those, we call them retail authentics, and then the breakaways. The breakaways, the only real jersey that I had a problem with quality. I own, I think, only one Kings breakaway jersey, and I absolutely hate it. I think all the, the colors are wrong. The materials are super funky looking to where they're cheap. Not only are they cheap, but they completely change the look of the jersey. They like the colors I talked about are just completely incorrect. And you go back to what Reebok had at that price point with their premier jersey, and I think it was, twice as good as what the breakaways are. But I know you got a lot of jerseys too, so talk to me. What's your take?
I'm glad you said exactly what you said. My problem isn't so much with the price point of the Authentic Pro. I think if you are a hardcore jersey collector, you should have the access to buy the jerseys that you want. I also don't have a problem with the $229 price point for the Authentics, or for the premiums. Woof, a lot of words there. The reason why Adidas was going to charge that, Reebok would probably charge that. Why should Fanatics change?
Reebok prices were way up there, and that's way back then. Think about authentic jerseys back then for like what, $300+.
Yeah, I mean, it to me, the price, those two price points make sense. And if you're going into Team LA, or if you're going to the Kings Fanatics online website and you want to buy a jersey, I hate to say it this way, you kind of get what you pay for. For me, the problem is the breakaway jersey. It's always been the breakaway jersey. I think if you want to grow the sport and you want to make the game accessible, especially in a market like Southern California, you cannot charge someone $174 for that kind of jersey quality. Those are the kind of jerseys that you sell for, like, honestly, like $70. Like, they do not equate to 174 in my eyes, given the quality, given how they press the logo. The logo's not even super glittery. The material on the sparkles is not really all that great. But if you want to go a step above and you want to buy the premium, you have that option. I think everything about the Fanatics lineup, the quality is the same. It's made from the same factory. The only thing it doesn't have are the Adidas dimples on the shoulders, which I kind of loved. I learned to love that. I think we
all grew to love that little detail there.
Yeah, I really learned to love that. But making a low quality jersey, $174, and this is not on the Kings. Every team is doing this. This is a Fanatics thing. I think is kind of where you lose me a little bit, because That is not something I would want to charge $174 to a kid like you and me when we were 10 years old wanting our first Kings jersey. I think that's a little over the top. But all in all,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the jerseys, how they look. I'm glad they came out good. I mean, we kind of saw the issues with Major League Baseball. It doesn't seem like the NHL is going to have that, fortunately. So all in all, I think it's a win for Fanatics outside of that breakaway jersey.
I think we got a little pricing mix up here. I'm on Team LA right now. It looks like the blank of the retail authentics, that middle range jersey, is 190. 190, and then with name, it's cool they have two options now. So they made this as a Fanatics thing, but on that retail jersey at 190 for a blank, you can do name and number. It says pro stitched customization for 100, or you can also do a heat press for $30 less. I mean, we wouldn't ever do a heat press, but it's nice to give the fans more options.
I think that's fantastic. I'll have to compare it because I'm going off of the Fanatics website in front of me. So 229 for a Drew Doughty home premium, which
Yeah.
is that basically what you could have got last season from Adidas, which is like the
Yeah.
max you could have got. And then the authentic pro 424 and the breakaway jersey with Kopitar
Yeah.
174. Blanks are 134. That's a little better.
Mhm.
But yeah, all in all, I think it's a home run from Fanatics and the Kings. The jerseys look fantastic. I can't wait to see them on the ice. But I don't know, Jordan. Any concluding thoughts on the jerseys before we go into the chunk of what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, no, I'm pumped for the new jerseys. I think the hate that Fanatics gets for monopolizing the sports memorabilia marketplaces can be warranted, but as far as the major sports team jerseys, from what I heard, the MLB thing was just a Nike thing.
It was a
Like the
Nike thing, yeah.
materials and the way it looked, it was a Nike problem, not a Fanatics problem. So I don't think people should be carrying that hatred for Fanatics into the NHL season. I think we should come in with a little bit of an open mind and see what we get before we start complaining.
The Kings get going Monday night. Preseason officially starts. They play against the team with no name, the Utah Hockey Club. For those in Pacific time, 5 p.m. Pacific. So a late afternoon game for the boys in black. Jordan, let's get into the main event of this episode. We kind of teased it a little bit last week. So let's go ahead and talk about it now. The Pacific Division at one point was probably the toughest division to play in from maybe 2010 to about 2017. The Pacific was a problem. You had LA, you had Anaheim, you had San Jose. Obviously, Vegas got into the mix. There was a time there where Calgary was pretty dangerous. And now, after a couple years of, dare I say, mediocrity, where the Central was getting all those wild card teams, it kind of seems like the Pacific is back and really, really tough. Not every team's going to compete for a playoff spot, but the teams that aren't competing are super, super fun to watch and or sneaky. So let's break down what our projections for the Pacific are going to look like this year. We'll kind of go back and forth like we did last week. Who do you have winning the division this year in the Pacific?
Number one in the Pacific, I got Vancouver.
Whoa, really? Go
Yeah.
for it. Talk to me.
So it's really a two-team race. No one else is even close. Edmonton or Vancouver, if you say anyone else, I think you're just wrong. But Vancouver, I think, is just that regular season team. I think that's what I'll call them. I think they're so deep. They have so much talent from top to bottom. All it's really going to depend on is the health of the big piece there, net Thatcher Demko. But even if this is kind of the hot take, but even if Demko, is bugged and doesn't get to play the whole year, is on and off, you got Shilov's there, and I think that with the team in front of him, I don't think it's going to matter. I think that team is going to win the division, and for Edmonton, as good as they were in the playoffs, I do think they're going to have those little couple of droughts in the regular season again, and I don't see them winning the division. What's your take on this one?
I have Edmonton winning the Pacific this year. And one of the big reasons why is just they are so strong up top. They re-sign Draisaitl to that huge extension. And you have to imagine that kind of leaves the way for McDavid to stay in Edmonton as well. The cap is only going to go up. But they add that secondary scoring. Unfortunately, at the Kings' expense, they did get Victor Arvidsson. They do go out and get a guy like Jeff Skinner, fourth line guy in Podkolzin, but a welcome addition, someone that I thought was really going to pan out earlier on in his career, and he still can. He's still fairly young.
Yeah,
but where they did get eaten alive was defensively, losing Broberg, losing Holloway, losing Ceci. I know Ceci was kind of the punching bag for Edmonton all season long, but that is a big, strong right-handed defenseman that could be very, very important come April. That's where I think that they will falter, especially when you look at how questionable Stuart Skinner can be at times. I still think he is a very reliable number one starting goaltender in the National Hockey League. But that offensive unit, and they're going to get Evander Kane back, is super dangerous. And for that reason, I will never bet against McDavid, even though it hurts me and the Kings are unfortunately victims of that. I do think Edmonton runs away with the division, in my opinion. So I imagine you have Edmonton at second then. I'll let you kick off your reasons why they're second.
I got Edmonton at second. Like I said, I don't think they're really that much of, the regular season shining star. I like the additions, Skinner, Podkolzin, Jeff Skinner, Podkolzin, and Victor Arvidsson. As much as I loved Arvidsson in a Kings uniform, the dude was just, consistently injured. And with the guy, it's aging like that. I don't see that changing as much as I would love to see, him succeed. Jeff Skinner, good secondary scoring signing there. And then Podkolzin, I think he's still like 23 or under 24. So I don't know. I think he might be under 23. I don't know. But he's got a young guy that's got a good chance to, still prove himself in the league. And I think he'll get a whole lot of opportunity with Holloway gone. But I will never bet against Connor McDavid, but I will always bet against Darnell Nurse and Stuart Skinner. So that's the reason why I have Edmonton at 2. I think the defense and the goaltending isn't really, built to be number 1 all year long.
So I see your point, and I raise you the question, say something is wrong with Demko. Do you trust a really green and young Sheilofs right now over a Stuart Skinner that I'm not going to say he led, but he was between the pipes for a team that made it to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final?
I mean, obviously, if it's, I think that if it's a playoff game, you might go with the veteran with more experience, but Sheilov's, like I said before, I put the team in front of him. I don't see it. I don't see the young goaltender being an issue. Even if they have to throw in the goalie they signed in Kevin Lankinen, I think the team is just too strong to not win the division. Why do you have Vancouver at number 2?
I have them at 2 simply because I think that I just have that much confidence in Edmonton, unfortunately. It's really not a slight on Vancouver at all. It's just who I think is going to, because let's put it this way. Did anyone see Edmonton having that skid that they had in the beginning of 22-23? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they'll really replicate that, and that shoot off so many points from their end of season total, and yet they finished where they finished and they made it that far. You know what I mean? That's one of those things where I don't really see Edmonton going through that kind of skid again, whereas I could see Vancouver going on little slumps. I mean, every team is going to go on slumps. That's the nature of the National Hockey League. There's so much parity. Any team can truly win on any given night, and that's one of the reasons that our sport is so fun to watch. But the question for me is the goaltending. And if Thatcher Demko is someone that's going to be on and off, I think Sheilofs has all the potential to be a true number 1. I really do. But to put that kind of expectation on him on a team that could contend for a Stanley Cup is a little tough for me. And I hope he proves me wrong, because I'm always pro goalie. This is a goaltender friendly podcast. Um, but that's one of the things that really scares me. I really do think you need strong goaltending, and someone that young is something that scares me a little bit. But that being said, they still have an incredibly deep team. You're looking at Pedersen, you're looking at Miller, Quinn Hughes, Besser, Hoglander. Like this is a team that is super, super close to contending for a Stanley Cup. I mean, their window is opening now, which is scary if you're a Kings fan because it kind of feels like it's the opposite for us. Our window felt like it was opening in 22 when we took Edmonton to 7. And now some of the moves, some of the things that we've lost, aging contracts, aging superstars, it just kind of feels stagnant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what do you take away from that?
Yeah. I mean, being a Kings fan, seeing those two teams on top of the division, I mean, we grew to hate the Canucks as kids in those early 2010s, and grew to hate Edmonton now. So it does suck, but I mean, I do think with the NHL, it's anybody's league. You know, it like the it can be an ace seed winning the Stanley Cup. So you never know. You got always got to be hopeful, but I think the Kings just got to keep pursuing. You know, the small window. I agree, it is a closing window, but we'll see what happens with this year.
Who do you have third in the division?
So I have the Kings at third.
Okay, take me through it, brother.
Yeah. So I think as much as the Kings have changed over the offseason, the loss of PLD, and the addition of a guy like Warren Fogle, and loss of Arvidsson, it added Tanner Janot. I think if we can figure out this whole not playing the 1-3-1 and being a more balanced team, I think the way that the Kings play will completely counteract who I think is number 4 in the Golden Knights, and the losses that they had. They lost, some big parts of their core and their cup winning core. Jonathan Marchessault, Alec Martinez, Chandler Stevenson, William Carrier. I don't even know where Logan Thompson went. I think they traded him on draft night. But yeah, I have the Kings maybe by a few points above Vegas, just for the reason that I think Vegas lost a lot of pieces, and Vegas was a consistently decent team last year. I don't think they were as strong as everyone makes them out to be.
Yeah.
They went through those stretches of win a handful, lose a handful, win a handful, lose a handful, and they were consistently you know mediocre.
I I see what you're saying, and I agree. Um, but I think the gap between LA and Vegas is super, super close. And over the course of an 82 game season, um, I think Vegas has a very, very slight edge, and I'll tell you why. I think offensively, the Kings they can go toe to toe with this Vegas team in a 7 game series throughout the course of a season. You look at their 4 lines, and I look at our 4 lines, and there isn't much that separates the two outside of maybe Trevor Lewis. Um, wow, what a crazy shot, Trevor Lewis. Sorry, player. But where they do get the advantage, in my eyes, is their defensemen and their net minding. Um, I think the Kings are close. I think the Kings are deep, but you look at what they have defensively. Their top line was Noah Hannafin, who I prayed would be an LA King someday. And Petrangelo, Braden McNabb, Shea Theodore, Hagee, White Cloud, like those guys, that is a deep defensive core. And I'm not saying the Kings can't play to that level. I'm not saying the Kings aren't going to be good defensively. Not saying that at all. But I would take that Vegas defensive core over a very young and fresh Clark and Spence right now. Not saying that I think that those guys aren't going to pan out and be significantly better than what Vegas has right now. But if I was in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final and I needed one of those two defense pairings, I give the edge to Vegas today. But things change over the course of 82 games, right? Maybe these kids, they come up, they become instant X factors, and LA ends up having a better defensive core. But that is too far out in the future based on the projections that I feel comfortable making right now. I think Vegas does have a very scary, almost suffocating defensive core. And then net minding, we talked about it last week. Kemper, we know what we need out of him, and Riddick, but they come out and acquire Ilya Samsonov, Aiden Hill, who led them to a Stanley Cup not too long ago. That's a strong 1-2 punch right there in Hill and Samsonov.
Yeah, I mean, Samsonov, he shaky as he looked, and he got absolutely obliterated by the media over there in Toronto. I think he can be a solid goaltender when he's not in his head. Although I'm not the biggest Aiden Hill fan, and I don't think as far as just sheer skill is, it's him and Darcy Kemper that far apart. I think Hill plays with a fantastic defense in front of him, and I think that has a lot to do with his stats over the years. What's your take on the goaltending?
I agree. I do think that he is a beneficiary of what's in front of him, but you could have made that same argument for Cam Talbot last year.
Oh, absolutely.
That's one of the things is the Kings were playing the system they were playing with the units that they had, and I mean they had Matt Roy, who was such a good stay-at-home defenseman. Those are the things that trickle into the postseason, and those are the players you want to have on your roster. That being said, I do agree. I don't think those two netminders are super far off, but Samsonov, I think, is a really, really good ad for them. I know that comes because they lost Logan Thompson, who I really thought was going to be the true number one of that team until he got hurt. Because that season that his rookie season, he made it to the All-Star game. He looked like he was a force to be reckoned with. And then unfortunately injuries got in the way of who I thought could be, well, I'm not going to go as far, maybe not a Vezina candidate, but he could have been in that conversation.
I thought he was their franchise goalie for sure.
And it was the perfect storm with Fleury leaving or being dealt. And then, him coming in and being what he was. It kind of seemed like the stroke of luck continued for Vegas between the pipes, going from one franchise goalie to the next. So I think the Kings and the Knights are super, super close, but I do give the Kings that first wild card spot. So I'll let you talk about your wild card team, and then I'll go off on why the Kings are my wild card team to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say about Vegas other than what we talked about, but I think the losses are monumental, and I think it's going to have a heavy hit on team chemistry as a whole. So that's kind of why I have Vegas sinking out of the top three there, and the Kings taking their spot.
The Kings are interesting.
Let's talk about the Kings.
The Kings are interesting, and after all, this is a Kings show, so it's only right we get back to it. The Kings are an interesting team to me because they're one of those teams that are too good to miss the playoffs, but they're not bad enough to get a high draft pick. You know what I mean? Like they're one of those like middle 10 teams that are going to be fighting for their season. So that is the position that I see the Kings in. I'm not saying that I don't believe in them. I really want them to be good. But when you look at who's above them, even though the gap between them and Vegas, as I can't emphasize enough, is not that deep in my eyes, Vancouver and Edmonton are different beasts. Those are teams that can contend for a Stanley Cup. And I'm not saying the Kings can't, but I would put my eggs in a basket more for those two than LA, simply based on how they're built. So I think the Kings, if they can buy into that new system, if the depth can provide what they need to provide, we can say all the nice things we want, but those young guys do need to step up. The Kings do need production out of Turcotte. They need Clark to take a step forward. He doesn't have to save the world this year, but he has to be the guy we hope he is. Similar to Byfield, in years past where he showed glimpses of brilliance, and now it's time for him to take the keys from Kopitar. Same thing with Brandt Clark and Drew Doughty, where he's been around, he's played a couple games, he's showed strokes of brilliance, and now I would like to see him take that next step. And that's where I think the Kings are. Are they going to win the cup with Doughty and Kopitar still around? I sure hope so. It'd be a great way for them to finish out their careers, but it's the Byfields, it's the Clarks, it's the Spences, and I'll even put Kempe in that conversation as well, that are going to take the Kings to that next level.
Yeah, I think there has to be a big step from the young guys, like you said. The secondary scoring has to be there. We like I'm just going to reiterate this fact that the Kings don't have that bona fide superstar, and we need to rely on that secondary scoring, and it has to show up night in and night out. I think they'll be, very very close to that playoff position, right there with Vegas. And I don't think there's really any other teams that are knocking on the door there, but you never know. It's a long season. Any team could surprise you here in the Pacific.
Here's the X factor for me when it comes to the Kings. It's gonna be the bottom six right now. Daily Faceoff has the bottom six as Moore, Deneau, Thomas, Jeannot, Turcotte, and Lewis. That is a really good looking bottom six, in my opinion. It's gonna be those guys that really take the team to the level that they want to be at. I really hope Akil Thomas is the guy we want him to be. I do not take this lightly when I say that I really do think he can be our next Dustin Brown as far as how he
Hmm.
plays, the way he executes. He is just a ball of energy out there. It really reminds me of a young Dustin Brown where he was just physical, finding ways to play in gritty areas, finishing when he has the chances presented to him. That is kind of what Akil Thomas is to me. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that he's gonna have that career. I really hope he does, but playing wise, I see those parallels, and I really want him to pan out. Same with Turcotte. Turcotte, he has all the intangibles that the Kings are looking for. He could have been a 60, 70 point guy uh, when he got drafted. I really wanted him to be that. And if he is not that, then that is fine. As long as he just shows that he's going to take a step forward. That's kind of what you are expecting out of 15 in black.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. You got the young guys as your X factor. For me, I really have it as Darcy Kemper. I think without a 1-3-1, like you said, we're going to get some more shots against. And I think Darcy Kemper has to, revert back to, the way he played with the Kings before. And I think that's going to be the biggest X factor in where the Kings land in this division.
As far as the rest of the Pacific, not a whole lot to report. I actually think someone from the Central is going to take that second wild card spot. I think the Central is starting to look a little scary as well. Some of the teams that are going to probably take a little bit of a step. Seattle, that leaves us with Anaheim, San Jose, Seattle, and Calgary.
Calgary.
Not a whole lot to report there. I think Calgary is kind of right down the middle. Seattle's kind of right down the middle. Maybe they can contend for that second wild card spot. There's not a whole lot there that scares me. But as much as I hate to say it, the Ducks and the Sharks, they might suck, but they're going to be really fun to watch.
Yep. So much young talent down there on both those farms. And a lot of that young talent is looking to crack the opening night rosters for those teams. So you got young guys on Anaheim like Cutter Gauthier. You have the Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, Trevor Zegras looking for a big bounce back year. You got in San Jose over there in the Bay, you got Will Smith, Macklin Celebrini, defenseman and Sam Dickinson. Just there's a lot to be excited about in those two systems. And we're going to get to see glimpses into the future here for those two teams who, were born and raised to not like, but you can't help but acknowledge the amount of sheer youthful speed and talent in both those farm systems.
They're going to be fun to watch, but we're not going to give them too much credit. But at long last, the freeway face-off is going to mean something. Those games are going to be really fun to watch now. It's no longer going to be the Kings beating up on Anaheim. It's going to be really close. Maybe not really close, but
I don't know about close.
They're going to be more competitive is what I'm trying to say, really. And then San Jose, I think San Jose is still kind of, they're building to something, really, but I still think that those games are going to look a little similar to how the Kings-Ducks games of late have looked, where the Kings
I think San Jose could be a little surprising for most people this year.
Hey, brother, that's your opinion, and that's why we talk on this show. But I think San Jose is going to be on the struggle bus this year. I could very easily see them getting a top 3 draft pick again next season, which for what they're building out there might not be the worst thing in the world. I mean, there was questions as to whether or not Celebrini was going to go back to college or not. Clearly not.
Same with Smith.
So they're green. They're gonna struggle. That's the way of life in the National Hockey League. They're not gonna be they're gonna be game breakers. They're gonna be playmakers, but they're not gonna change the world overnight because they don't really
Yeah.
have that makeup the way Toronto had when Matthews in his rookie season. They had a pretty good team around those youngsters, and they already kind of had pre-existing prospects that lifted them to a
Yeah.
postseason spot. But I just don't see that in San Jose at all. So that's where we stand on the bottom couple teams there in the Pacific, unless you have anything to add there, brother.
No, that's about all I got. We pretty capped it really well. Yeah, I don't have anything to add about any other teams.
So let's take a quick look at what the rest of the week is going to look like, because we're recording this on Sunday, which means you'll hear it either on Monday or Tuesday. But the Kings have taken steps. The Kings are finally getting going. The season is right around the corner. The preseason starting next week on Monday. It is an exciting time. This is the first, second, third year in a row where you look at this roster and there is reason to be excited. So, as we do enter these first couple games of preseason, what do you want to see out of the Kings? What do you want to see out of those younger players and that older group? Because there are going to be two different squads playing in games. So, who do you think has impressed you so far in training camp, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, no, as far as what I want to see out of the boys, I want to see some chemistry being built. I mean, we got some new guys coming in, some younger guys getting more time. So I think that that chemistry that is really important for the longevity of the season is going to take some time to build. So you just kind of want to see, passes being made, guys being in the right place, and I just want to see the team develop and take a step forward as a whole and not just as individuals.
I would agree. I am right there with you. This is a team that's they're not gonna save the world overnight. It's definitely gonna be a process. But I actually trust Jim Hiller. He's saying all the right things right now for me. He's saying what I would hope he is saying. And I think by welcoming that physicality and welcoming that kind of grit, that is what the Kings are. That's what made them so fun to watch in the 2000s, or 2010s, I should say, because they weren't fun to watch in the 2000s. In the 2010s, it was their physical, gritty style of play, and the way that they were just like cockroaches. They never went away. That what was so fun and unique about the Kings teams is they were so gritty. And I'm not talking about that orange atrocity in Philadelphia. The Kings are fun. I hope that continues, and hopefully in a couple weeks when we come back for episode 3, we have some more fun stuff to report. So, yeah, that's episode 2 of Forum Blues. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and joining us for another hour and change of LA Kings hockey talk. If you're listening to us on Spotify, make sure you give us that 5-star review. Does a lot in our neck of the woods. And if you're listening on Apple, just keep on listening, baby. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week. And as always, go Kings, go.